We're here with Ride Director Ragan Williams. In this informational segment, we're going to discuss what we can all expect each day out in the routes. Ragan, can you tell us what time the routes will open and close each day?
Yeah, the routes each day will open up at sunrise. Everybody needs to be on the routes by 9 a.m. The routes will close each day at 5 p.m. except for the last day, which closes at 3 p.m.
So Ragan, when you talk about the route closing at 5 or closing at 3 on the last day, what about the support for some riders that might be out there in the last few minutes? Is it just a hard close, or will we continue to have support out there for those that are finishing up?
Yeah, we'll have our SAG support out there, so if you're a slower rider or if it's just taking you a little bit longer to get from point A to point B, we'll still have our support out there, and we keep track of the last person on the route. So as long as you're out there, we'll have somebody out there to keep an eye on you and make sure that you're making it in, and then we'll keep track of you that way.
Okay, now what about the rest of our support in terms of how many SAG vehicles we can expect out there, where they'll be throughout the route, how many rest stops we can look forward to, and kind of the mileage between each of those, as well as our mechanical support?
Okay. Yeah, so we have SAG vans, which are support and gear. Those are the vehicles that are going to be out on the route each day. They'll be driving up and down the routes to offer you assistance if you need help. If you have a flat tire, or you just can't make it up the hill, or there's an area where you just feel like you need to just get a ride to the next rest stop. So we'll have our SAG vehicles out there. It's usually about 3 or 4 vans will be out there to help you, and they're clearly marked that say SAG on them, so you can't miss them. As far as rest stops, you can anticipate about 3 to 4 rest stops every day, and they're going to be spaced out about every 10 to 20 miles. Those rest stops will be your chance to stop, get off the bike, and refuel. We'll also have bathrooms there as well. We'll have bike mechanics out on the route that'll help you get back on your bike if you have a mechanical failure. They're going to be at rest stops along the routes each day and also at camp.
Ragan, I understand that each rider will receive a informational packet upon checking into the ride. In that packet, there'll be a variety of information, as well as each day's cue sheets, which will have your turn-by-turn cues, rest stop information, and so forth. What about markings out on the route when riding?
Yeah, so on this ride, we try to make it as simple as possible to get you from point A to point B without getting lost. As you mentioned, we do have cue sheets that you pick up with your rider packet at check-in. Those cue sheets will give you turn-by-turn instructions on how far it is to the next turn, how many rest stops. You'll see those listed. You'll also see if there's gas stations, restaurants, points of interest on those cue sheets. So you have that. If you choose not to use that, we also have these markings that are on the road. This is the Dan Henry marking. So at each turn, you'll have a follow-up marking as well as a marking at the turn, and then you'll also have a confirmation marking once you make that turn. So obviously this will be your right turn, this will be your left turn, and then you'll have a confirmation that'll tell you to go straight. We try to put markings down about every 2 miles if we're on a long stretch and you kind of get to the point where you're like, I hadn't seen any markings or signs. We try to put those markings down as a confirmation just to make sure that you're on the right path and you're not lost. We'll also have turn signs similar to these that will be at every single turn. So if you're coming up, you'll have your lead up marking on the road, your marking at the road, and then you'll have this turn sign, which is easy to see in case there's something that's covered up the road markings or there's a car sitting at the turn.
Ragan, will we see any other types of markings in addition just to the turn sign that you just showed us there? Will we find any markings, for instance, at railroad tracks to show extra caution, or will there be any marks at any point where there may be a confusion where we might be going the wrong way?
Yeah, so we have the main markings you want to look for are where you need to turn, but if there's a pothole or if there's railroad tracks coming up, we'll kind of highlight those with orange paint, or we'll use cones as well. So we try to make sure we point those out for you, so that way when you're riding, when you come up on them, you'll see them. Also, we're not the only bike ride out there, so there are other markings on the road. So if you see other markings, don't follow those. Look for our bright orange markings that we have on the road, as well as our turn signs. Because if you start riding some of the other routes that are out there, you'll end up at somebody else's starting ending point and not Cycle, North Carolina's.
Speaking of the routes, again, what kind of conditions can we expect? What kind of roads will we be traveling? So many of the riders come from out of state. Can you just give them a quick synopsis of what they can expect coming into the ride?
Yeah, the great thing about North Carolina is we have the opportunity to take back roads with very minimal traffic, and with that comes, the great scenery that North Carolina has to offer. The road conditions can be from newly paved roads that are nice and smooth to what we call chip and seal. The closer you get to eastern North Carolina, you hit the roads that have the never-ending tar strips. So, it really ranges. We try to find the best road conditions, but sometimes there are just sections where we have to be on a certain road to get to a certain area. But we try to make it as safe as possible and get you across the state in 7 days without any harm.
Okay, now if I were to have a personal SAG along with me on the ride that's going stop to stop, do they need to ride along with me throughout the day? Do they need to keep up with the pace of the ride on the route, or will there be an alternative for them?
Yeah, so all personal SAGs, first of all, they all have to be registered on the ride as a non-rider. And if you have a vehicle on the ride, they need to be registered with the vehicle. All personal SAGs are not allowed on the route. At check-in in the rider packet for the non-riders, we will give you a tag that you'll put up in your vehicle, as well as alternate route directions to get you from camp to camp without getting on the routes. There are some sections where you'll be on the route because it's the only way to get down, but we try to get you off the route so that we're not putting vehicles on the routes when we're trying to keep the minimal traffic.
Now, is there a certain time that personal SAGs can get to the next day's site? Can they go the night before? Do they have to wait until the route's closed to get out there? What time can they be at camp?
Yeah, so all personal vehicles are not allowed into the next day's camp until 10 o'clock. This gives myself and my support team enough time to get there in the morning to set up camp and make sure we get all of our signage set up at camp, so that way we're not telling you to pack up your stuff and move to another area after you've already started setting up. Because the last thing you want to do is set up a tent, tables, chairs, or whatever, and then have us come up and say, hey, sorry guys, but you're set up in the wrong area, we need you over here. So we want to make sure we have enough people there to direct you in the right locations. And also with the packet that the non-riders will pick up, you'll have site maps that will show you exactly how the site's going to be laid out. So make sure you pay attention to that, and it'll show where RVs are going to park, where outdoor camping is, where indoor camping is, and that kind of stuff. So that's really kind of the blueprint for each campsite.